Hey, Terry, great to finally meet you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's great to meet you as well.
Is it okay if we just jump right in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, let's rock. Okay, so one of the first questions I've got is, what was your journey to becoming a product manager? How'd you get there?
Totally. So I recently graduated from school. I studied computer science at NYU, and now I work as a PM at Twitter. I work full time. I'm actually in an APM program, and I can talk a little bit about what exactly that means. But an APM program is actually specifically geared for new graduates. And so my role into product management or my transition, I knew when I was a student that I was really interested in product management, and I can talk a little bit more about like where that interest came from. But it was something that I was passionate about, really excited about. And so as I was applying for jobs upon graduation from school, I knew that I wanted to break into the role. I think it's kind of difficult to break into product management sometimes because a lot of PM roles tend to be for people who have a couple of years experience. So it's one of those things where it's like, how can you get experience without getting experience? Fortunately, I think that with the rise of interest in product management, APM programs are something that are really on the rise. And so lots of different tech companies have APM programs. APM stands for Associate Product Manager or Associate Product Management. Basically new grad roles that are meant to be rotational programs geared towards like shaping the next generation of product managers. There's usually like a rotation through different products. You learn from more senior product managers. You build your PM skills. And so when I was applying, I basically applied for all of the APM programs that I knew about and was really fortunate to be able to be accepted to Twitter's inaugural APM program. And so yeah, that was kind of like my path into product management.
What's been helpful for you in starting as a product manager?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really easy to do when you're in an APM program, but I think that even if you're just starting out as a PM, maybe later in your career or whatnot, it's really, really important. And I know this is cliche because people say this in tech all the time, but having a mentor, I think, is very important. And that could be, official or unofficial, right? Like maybe you just have a super smart manager who you want to check in with regularly. Maybe it's someone who does or does not work at your company who you can talk to. But I think that with product management, one thing that's kind of difficult about it is that product management looks different depending on the company that you're at and the product that you're working on. That being said, the thing that kind of unites product managers are certain skills, certain experiences, certain ways about thinking about product development. And so people who have been doing product for a really long time, even if they haven't been presented with the same exact issue or product problem that you might be facing right now, they might have faced something similar in the past or have developed skills that could be directly applicable to any given situation. And so I think that having a mentor to really guide you when it comes to thinking about products and when it comes to developing products, especially as an APM or especially when you're just starting out, is incredibly, incredibly useful. My manager helps me a ton when it comes to thinking through product development. But in addition to that, I'm really fortunate in that I know a lot of PMs at other companies who I'm able to chat with or think through certain problems. And so I think that that's something that is really, really important and something to definitely be on the lookout for when you break into product management.
Okay. So the takeaway is have a mentor. Is there anything that you would suggest a person look for specifically to know that they're getting a good mentor or a manager that can be a mentor?
Totally. I mean, I think it's all about feedback, right? No one's perfect. And so I think even when it comes to just an informal sort of mentor-mentee relationship, being able to sit down with someone like, hey, what did you think about this thing I did last week? What do you think about this product development? Or I have this idea. One way to tell whether or not you're getting good advice is if you get negative feedback, especially when you're starting out, because there's so much to know and there's no way to learn it all super, super quickly, in my opinion. And so when you have conversations with people, if everyone's super cushy, you're doing great, just keep it up, do the same thing over and over, that's probably less valuable than the people who are yes, this thing is good, yes, this thing you did correctly, but here are the bunch of other things that you didn't think about, that you could have done better, that you could have improved upon. For me, I mean, I think it's always tough to get any sort of negative criticism, but the silver lining there is that that the people are being honest. Hopefully that it's useful and that you realize things that you didn't realize before, and you also know that there's at least somewhat invested in the betterment of your career and of your role.
How are you specifically developing your skills and talents?
Totally. So for me, this kind of circles back to what I was talking about before in terms of like mentorship and whatnot. But for me, it's kind of twofold. So as I mentioned before, I have a manager who I report to directly. And with my manager, we often have conversations about product development, ideas that I have, projects and products that we're working on. And so we have a very sort of like collaborative relationship. And I think because I'm just starting off right now, it's very collaborative. And then I think as I learn more and as I become a little bit more independent, it'll be more, I'll depend on my manager less to sort of make some important decisions. That being said, it's very Twitter focused, right? Because my manager obviously also works at Twitter. I also talk to a lot of other PMs at Twitter about sort of like ideas related to our product specifically. And so that's very helpful in terms of like me building my skills and me developing for building like very Twitter-centric products. That being said, on the flip side, I think it's also important to sort of like maintain conversations and relationships with people who are PMs working on products that are not related to maybe your like 9 to 5 job. That being said, I think that being able to like talk to people who don't necessarily work on your same product can provide a fresh perspective, can provide different insights. People who work on products different from you often kind of have different ways of thinking about products that are a little bit more oriented towards the types of products that they work on, which I think is something that's very valuable. But also one thing that I think that's important in terms of like maintaining relationships with product managers outside of your company, you remember what it's like to sort of be an objective product manager. And I don't know if that actually exists, but it's good to sort of like keep in mind different ways of thinking about different products and how product managers across the spectrum are doing product. Because I think it is kind of easy to get pigeonholed into one way of doing things when you work at a company. And I think that could be very valuable to that company. But if down the line I want to work on a different product, or if I, want to build something in my free time or whatever the case may be, it's kind of valuable to also have that skill set in terms of like thinking about how to build products that are different from what I'm used to.
All right, great. What should they consider and know about the career before they enter in and find out, oh, I'm here, don't like it, right? So what would you offer up for them as words of wisdom?
Yeah, so 2 things. The first would be to sort of explore the landscape a little bit, because I do think that people who are very product oriented tend to be very adaptable and can learn how to work on different types of products. But it's possible that you might really like working on one product and not like working on another kind of product. So one piece of advice would be to be very, very mindful about the types of products that you want to work on, and to make sure that like you're interested in product management, but you're not just like, I want this title anywhere I am. But you make sure that, you have this title and you have this role for something that you care about, that you could grow from, that you're interested in. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing that I think is kind of uniform based on conversations that I've had with lots of product managers, the role is very context switch heavy. And by that I mean, on any given day, you do a million things. And I think a lot of people think that's exciting and think that it's fun, but it really is a skill that you kind of have to refine to be able to like sit and focus on one thing for an hour, and then the next minute have to completely switch 180 degrees and do something else, and continue to do that throughout the day. That can be mentally taxing. That could be a little bit stressful. It could be hard to kind of like balance all of those things at once. And everyone sort of has a different workflow for how they manage that. But I think that's something that's kind of uniform for all product managers, no matter what it is that you're working on. And I think the amount of context switching that happens in any given day can be a lot. And I'm not sure if lots of people realize that. So that's something that I would definitely encourage someone who's interested in product management to consider beforehand.
Okay. I think that'll be great, because that's a nuance that I think folks don't necessarily get till after they've done it for a little bit and they think, oh yeah, I thought it was organized, but yeah, I think I need to figure out something else a little bit better because things are moving pretty quickly.
Totally.
All right. So next question is, I think probably a little bit more granular, but I think related to what you were just talking about, which is if you're a product manager, or when you're a product manager, how do you think through the backlog when you might not necessarily have, lots of experience to think about the roadmap and the releases that are coming? How do you do that due diligence in your thought to know, okay, this release is being set up in a way that kind of makes sense and will really resonate with users?
I think that one thing, including myself, a lot of new product managers think is that you have really good product intuition, right? Like I came to Twitter like, I know all of the things you need to change and fix, and it's going to be amazing. And I do think that having good product intuition is important and something that, again, is a skill that can be refined over time. That being said, I think that when it comes to developing anything, particularly when you're new and you don't know the history, when you're not entirely sure about what a roadmap might look like, is to be very data-driven. And I think that it's important to be data-driven more so at an early stage. And then as you sort of refine some of the systems that you want to build and some of the changes that you want to make, that's where some of that intuition comes in. But specifically, like when you're in a very, very early stage of product development thinking, it's important to gather data, right? Like if there's a broken window or a hole in a product that I want to fix, I have to think, is this a problem that we've seen before? Is this something that we've tried to fix before? What are the ways that we tried to fix it? Why or why not did it not work? Would it be worth revisiting some of those things again? Is it worth it to try something entirely new? Is this a problem that I personally have a problem with, or is this something that like most of our users have a problem with? That's a huge one because I think specifically in regards to Twitter, like I'm a power user. It's something that I use all the time, and now I work at the company, and so like my perception of the product is probably different from like the average person who like might occasionally use Twitter. So I think that when it comes to developing roadmaps and figuring out how you're going to go about building a product, at the very beginning, it's important to just do like an audit of the entire landscape of the product, of the history of it. And sometimes if you're new, that's literally just like asking people questions and being like, hey, do we have any documentation on this? Is this something that we've ever done before? Have we ever done anything similar to this before? And then once you sort of gather all of that data, that'll put you in a position where you have more context for the product. And that can put you on, I think, a more seamless road to sort of figuring out what types of product developments you want to build specifically.
All right, great. So that's most of our time for today. So the last question I've got, is there any sort of parting advice, tips, tricks, hints, secret sauce that you can share with someone who's like, okay, I'm going to be a product manager and I got my first gig. Now what? Like what?
Now what? Okay, first step is to follow me on Twitter, obviously, because following me on Twitter is the most important thing you can do in your life as a PM. Just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of speaks to what I was saying before, but if you have a gig and you're like ready to get started and you're super excited about it, I think that you should be very aggressive in terms of learning more about product development at whatever company it is that you're at. And for that means like learning about the systems that are in place, the relationships between product managers and other roles at the company, right? Like lots of PMs sit at the intersection between, for example, user research, design, engineering, whatever. I think it's important to kind of like get an understanding of the history of those relationships and what those work streams look like. And also, of course, sort of like know the product landscape, get to know the PMs at the company, be able to like have more insight into like what exactly it is that you're going to be working on and in what context. The other thing sort of related to this is like product management is such a people heavy role that it's really important to kind of like look at people as people and to remember like at the end of the day, you're building a product, but there are users at the end of that product. And equally as important, they're human beings that are building these products for users, right? I think that it's really easy to kind of like swirl into this whole of like building things and technology and code and design. But I think that it's important to like remain grounded and remember that there are human beings in every single part of this process. And it's important to like build relationships with those human beings, whether they're the other PMs or the engineers who are on your team or the users that are at the end of it. I think that being very user and very people focused will make you stronger, help you build faster, and also help you build products that people really love and care about. And then kind of circling back to what I was saying before, I think that it's also very valuable to maintain relationships with PMs that work at various companies that are different from your own, just in terms of like, you know, picking up on skills and learning what the PM landscape is in the industry as a whole, and not just as at your company, because I think that kind of having that holistic perspective will help you be a stronger PM at your company and for the product that you're working on.
Great. Love the energy. I feel like I'm going to go run 2 miles now, or, you know, like go run a 5K. And,
awesome. I'll join you.
Yeah. And it's dark here, so I need a headlight, I guess. But anyway.
Whatever works.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and be well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.